Joe, I say this as someone who lives in the state that likely carries out the most fraud, okay, and that's the state of California. I'm sad to report that literally no one in any position of power cares about fraud. They don't.
All right, folks, buckle up. We're diving headfirst into a whirlwind of political takes, conspiracy theories, and some truly wild claims from none other than Joe Rogan himself, and how he's apparently been silenced by Trump. We've got a lot to unpack, so let's hit play and see what kind of truth bombs, or maybe just regular bombs, are about to drop. Let's roll the tape.
Joe Rogan was one of your biggest endorsers in 2024. He said he understands that the president's sort of plan to deport people here who are here illegally, but he also understands why critics compare ICE officers to the Gestapo asking people for their papers. What's your response to him?
During an interview with NBC News, President Donald Trump was asked to respond to criticism that popular podcaster Joe Rogan has leveled against ICE and its belligerent conduct in Minnesota. Now, did he lash out? Did he try to keep the peace? You never know with Trump. He's a bit of a wild card. Now, the NBC host that you heard from, Tom Llamas, is correct that Joe Rogan has on multiple occasions shared concerns about ICE. For example, here was his response to the Renee Good shooting.
After that woman was shot, I think, unfortunately, well, everything's unfortunate about it, right? But one of the real problems is now ICE are villains. And now people are looking at them like murderous military people that are on the streets of our city, and they're masked up, which is also a problem, right? Because if you get arrested by a cop, you're allowed to ask the cop, what is your name and badge number? And you could film that cop. If you get arrested by an ICE agent, you have no such right. They're wearing a mask. They don't have to tell you. That's a problem. That's a problem on our city streets, right? It's complicated, obviously, but it's also very ugly. To watch someone shoot a US citizen, especially a woman, in the face, it just looked horrific to me. She didn't seem mentally healthy, but does that mean she should be shot in the head? Is there no other way to handle this?
Whoa, hold on a minute. Ugly to watch someone shoot a US citizen? I mean, sure, yet no one wants to see that. But let's not pretend ICE agents are just randomly going out shooting people for fun. These are federal agents, often dealing with dangerous situations involving individuals who have broken our immigration laws, and sometimes much worse than that. The comparison to the Gestapo, asking for papers, is just a tired, intellectually lazy trope designed to demonize law enforcement. Are we really going to equate border control with Nazi secret police? Give me a break. When you're here illegally, you don't get the same rights as a citizen. That's not ugly. That's the law, folks. And when these agents are facing down potential threats, sometimes lethal force is the only option to protect themselves and the public. Remember, they're there to protect the public. Let's stop with the emotional manipulation and remember that ICE agents are often the last line of defense in keeping our community safe. For those who want to exploit our broken system, they're there to protect us.
So what was Trump's reaction to what we just heard Joe Rogan say following the Renee Good shooting? Let's watch.
Look, first of all, he's a great guy. We had a tremendous success before the election. I think it was his biggest interview ever, and over 300 million people. It was very good. She didn't want to do it, you know. She decided not to do it because she's not capable. But I spoke to him 3 days ago. We had a great conversation, and all I'm doing, I have to keep.
Did he mention this to you? Did you guys talk about this? The ICE enforcement?
Yeah. Just had a good conversation. I think he's a great guy, and I think he likes me too.
Yeah.
And, you know, liking me isn't important. What happens is that I think we do a phenomenal job, but I don't think we're good at public relations.
For me, this story isn't about how Trump feels about Rogan's criticism. For me, this story is interesting because you had a conversation on the phone with Rogan 2 days ago. That kind of explains a lot about Rogan's kind of muted reaction to the Epstein files, for instance, muted reaction to Theo Von raising serious concerns about Israel and its undue influence over the United States. You know, these are topics that Joe Rogan used to be a bit of a trailblazer on. and all of a sudden very muted on these issues. And I just couldn't figure out why. But if you're taking calls from the president, that access and that relationship is gonna make you handle these stories a little differently. Now, in regard to polling, let's talk about it a little bit, because new polling from NPR has found that 65% of Americans believe that ICE has gone too far. That's the graphic that you're looking at right here. It's NPR PBS News Marist poll. And that's an 11-point increase from the summer. And it includes a whopping 77% of independents and 93% of Democrats. Still, only 27% of Republicans say ICE has gone too far, with 28% saying they haven't gone far enough. But there's more. A Quinnipiac poll did get similar results. They found that 63% of voters disapprove of the way ICE is enforcing immigration laws. And that's an increase of 6 percentage points since early January, when 57% disapproved. Now let's take a look at the next graphic. Or actually, this is the right one. So clearly there is genuine outrage in the country about how federal immigration agents are conducting their operations. And that's why we've seen massive protests break out, not just in Minnesota, but in other major metropolitan areas of this country as well, all over the country, against ICE and the Trump administration's immigration crackdown. Now, that may be part of why Trump also said during this interview that his administration needed a softer touch on immigration. But despite being willing to join in the criticism on ICE, Joe Rogan is now also simultaneously claiming that the protests are not actually organic. Now, he's argued multiple times that they're an effort to distract from something else, something much more important. I don't want to give it away. You should hear from the horse's mouth. Watch.
If it wasn't for that Nick Shirley kid and those videos, and apparently Nick Shirley had been informed by the GOP there that this was all going on, so this gets exposed, it gets into the public zeitgeist, it becomes a huge news story. It's not a coincidence that the riots break out in the exact same place where all this fraud is being exposed, because ICE is everywhere. They're all over the place, but it's not. The most violent interactions are the interactions that are happening in the place where the most fraud has been publicly exposed. This is all by design. Why riots only in Minneapolis? And why riots in the place where there's an ungodly amount of fraud that has been discovered?
Now, this is where Joe Rogan absolutely nails it. He's cutting through the noise like a hot knife through butter. Do you honestly think it's a coincidence that a massive unrest erupts precisely at the right moment when inconvenient truths about fraud, especially election fraud, start bubbling to the surface? Please. This is a classic play straight from the progressive playbook. When you can't win the argument, change the subject. Or, better yet, create a bigger, louder, more chaotic subject to drown out the original subject. It's like a magician doing a misdirection trick. Look over here at the shiny burning building, but don't pay attention to the guy stuffing ballots in the back. Rogan, he sees it for what it is. A cynical, calculated effort to divert public attention away from genuine accountability. They don't want you asking questions about how elections are ran. They want you to have outrage about something else entirely. It's not complex, folks. It's just manipulative. Good on Joe for calling out the smoke and the mirrors. Thank you.
Coincidentally, right around the same time.
Exactly. Like instantaneously afterwards, the narrative completely changes. Everybody forgets about the fraud. Now all anybody cares about is ICE and fascists and Nazis.
Joe, I say this as someone who lives in the state that likely carries out the most fraud, okay, and that's the state of California. I'm sad to report that literally no one in any position of power cares about fraud. They don't. Okay, the Trump administration used the excuse of fraud to target liberal cities and blue states, but have they actually done anything about fraud? Of course not. Of course they haven't. I'll give you another example. You just had Dr. Oz visit Los Angeles, stand in front of an Armenian bakery business, and accuse the Armenian bakery business that's been operating in Van Nuys, California as long as I can remember. I'm familiar with the bakery. I literally go to the bakery. I'm familiar with it. He accused the bakery of carrying out Medicare fraud. Medicare fraud. Now, did he do that because he genuinely believes that the Armenian bakery carried out Medicare fraud or anything else? No. He didn't have any evidence. All he said was, look at the Cyrillic writing. It is indicative of an Armenian-Russian gang known to carry out Medicare fraud. Okay, it wasn't Cyrillic writing. It was Armenian writing, and it said tarm lavash, which means fresh lavash. It's a bread.
Aha! So they're making bread over there, huh? Yeah, give me some of that Armenian bread.
And I don't say that to deny that Medicare and Medi-Cal fraud happens in California. It does happen.
See.
But they don't care to actually investigate it and do something about it. They don't care. They're just weaponizing this as a way to retaliate against blue cities and blue states. And it makes me so angry. And one other thing I have to just debunk about what Rogan said there. I don't know why he thinks that there are only protests happening in like Minnesota or anywhere ICE is operating. That's just not true. It's just not true. There have been more than 300 ICE out protests held around the US. So no, the demonstrations aren't just happening in Minnesota as he's suggesting.
No, yeah, but what I was gonna say, Anna, about that is, look, there's two theories. Joe's theory that Alex Preddy and Renee Good and everybody in Minnesota is part of the Somali plot and they wanna cover up the Somali fraud. Okay, I guess you could believe that, right? The other theory as to why ICE went more ballistic in Minneapolis is that since they were already targeting Minnesota, by the way, who happens to have a governor who ran for vice president and would logically run the next time around, and to character assassinate him would be perfect, right?
Are you saying it was politically motivated?
So once you already have this target, you go, okay, surge ICE into there, cause chaos, so we can blame Tim Walz and Fry and all the Democrats in Minnesota, and it's all their fault, and bring in even more people. But it backfired because they went too far. So, okay, so I think that's what's happening there. And the last thing on the Minnesota situation, Rogan mentioned riots.
Wait. Stop the presses. Not doing any rioting, not any assaults, not violence, not any law breaking? Are we living in the same universe? This is the same kind of gaslighting that makes you question your own sanity. 2 people were murdered, and we're supposed to pretend it was just a lively debate club meeting? This is exactly why so many Americans feel like they're being lied to by the mainstream media and the political establishment. They redefine words to fit their narrative. If you're blocking roads, clashing with law enforcement, and creating an atmosphere of intimidation, that's not a protest. That's a disruption. And it often escalates to riotous behavior. We all know that. To downplay violence and death as slightly objecting is not just inaccurate, it's insulting to anyone who actually witnessed the chaos. It's a desperate attempt to whitewash the reality on the ground and paint a picture of peaceful dissent where there was often anything but. Call a spade, folks. If it looks like a riot and it smells like a riot, it's probably a riot, no matter how much they want to try to spin it.
When did riots happen?
Where were the riots in Minnesota? Did anybody throw bricks through Starbucks windows? Was there a building set on fire? Did people go? I mean, there were no riots. What are you talking about? There was 2 people who slightly objected to ICE and got murdered, right? And by the way, there are tons of protesters blowing whistles, protesting, but not doing any rioting, not any assaults, not violence, not any law breaking. So don't tell me this is riots.
Look, there were riots in the summer of 2020 that the media overwhelmingly would not cover. I get that. That's not happening this time around. And when you smear these people who are demonstrating as rioters, that communicates to them, look at that, even when we're doing that, we're avoiding riots, there's no looting, we still get smeared as rioters anyway.
All right, what a ride. From Rogan silencing to the sheer audacity of denying what's right in front of our faces. It's clear the political spin cycle is in overdrive. But here's the thing, folks. We can't let them get away with it. We need to keep asking questions, keep challenging the narratives, and most importantly, keep sharing the truth. So, hit that like button, subscribe, and tell us in the comments what you thought of these wild takes. Your voice matters, so let it be heard. And as always, folks, stay vigilant, patriots, stay vigilant.